Well, yeah, the president actually has congratulated the man you see right there on the screen, Mr. Olusegun Awolowo, on his election as president of National Trade Promotion Organization, that's TPOs from ECOWAS member states. The president says with his election, he's confident that Nigeria will benefit from his immense experience in the West African coast, and what a time for that to actually happen, because I mean we do know that we need quite a number of that kind of trade, boosting trade, well, in Nigeria and in West Africa, because I mean we all know what's happening with the economy. So many people will do a lot, will benefit so much from that particular one.
Absolutely. The only thing that interests me in that would be, okay, so how is that going to play out when after effectively kicks in? I mean, all the talk about diversification of... Yes, effectively kicking in.
Even though they say, look, it has. So...
Effectively, do you feel the effect yet? We haven't really even begun. And don't forget that economists continue to talk about the fact that we need to increase our production capacity. But, you know, let's just hope that, you know, this will eventually indeed be what we're expecting it to be for us as a nation.
And don't forget, Africa has always been an exporting continent. But the value of what we're exporting is a question. How much value have we been able to put on those exports, such that, I mean, if it's just cocoa we've been exporting, how about export something that has more value? So this is a good one.
That's how much, how many things do we export? Well,
good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain. So
it's a beautiful Monday morning from here in Lagos. I'm Kayode Okikelu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Good morning and welcome. You know, one of the other things that will interest you is that much talked about Electoral Act.
Oh, yeah.
And
it won't go away.
I don't even think it will go away post-2023.
Wow.
I don't think it will go away because clearly the effect is not going anywhere yet. I mean, you've listened to what the National Assembly, the two chambers did last week, and then the President of the Senate is reacting, and the governors are reacting. I'm wondering, you know, Governor of Adamawa State, and I'm wondering, okay, so exactly how do the people that they represent take this on board?
And don't forget, the Senate President first spoke. I mean, in the midst of people, I mean, that are represented at the National Assembly, essentially the constituents. And it was as though he was taking the message back that this is what we've done and this is why we've done it. And he put out a statement afterwards, really explaining to Nigerians why that decision was made. And don't forget the statement by Governor Fintiri. And I'm just wondering, for a lot of Nigerians, especially the constituents, what their position is. I don't know if there's always a way to double check and find out from the people and say, I mean, maybe that's why there's a call for referendum, really, just to always, you know, fall back to the people, essentially, because from the feelers I'm getting, it would seem as though a lot more people are really disappointed by what played out at the National Assembly.
And that's the people. How about the electoral umpire itself? We had this conversation on Saturday, and they're saying we are capable 100%. Put that beside NCC's previous figures.
100?
Yes. INEC says, you know, first of all,
why don't you give us 50?
50%. That's the INEC, that's the electoral umpire.
Yeah, I mean, NCC says 50%.
The figures from NCC, you know, a survey commissioned by the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, put the reach for Nigeria for now at the very least 89% for 2G. Meanwhile,
and you need 3G or what?
And
for transmission of these elections?
2G. I mean, for God's sake, what are we expecting?
No, but from what they said, you heard him. You heard the man in the NCC say,
that's what they said.
We need 3G. But if INEC says we can.
Exactly. I think that's a question
which is much more important. I mean, who's the person, who better to say so? And not that it hasn't been done before. But, you know, part of that controversy, too, is those lawmakers who were absent while the voting went down first in the Senate. I mean, no matter the explanation that they've given, not many people buy it. They say, look, this is what we refer to as what? Medicine after death. That was the time they needed you. Your constituency needed you. So no matter what they had to do at that time, with due respect to all of those, people just feel, their constituencies feel, they failed them. Period.
I think maybe is still in the future. People have sent in their votes, really. Isn't that hard? This is how I'm voting, electronically.
In the House of Reps, those who were even present in the House of Reps were not even allowed to vote. They were right there. They have to stage a walkout. And then, you know, when that walkout happened, then they eventually paved the way. Well, that's the way it came across. They eventually went on, passed the bills, passed the PIB and all of those, and you now wonder the credibility of that passage as a result of that walkout. So how do they feel if a large chunk of people just staged, you know, walked out and said, no, this, if you have to muzzle us, no way, we're not having this.
And one of the reps actually raised it, and she said, I mean, this is a house for the people.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to make laws without our, whether, you know, minority or not, then that calls to question this whole process. But I think what I would also expect the National Assembly to be saying right now is, so yes, we have, I mean, court voted against electronic voting, or at least conditional electronic voting. What can we do to ensure that we meet up or fill that gap? And that's a conversation I'm not hearing.
It's very, very interesting, the kind of things that you will hear. You're talking about the representation, and it's quite instructive. What kind of consultations did we have with people? For God's sake, when we're saying that, you know, this network service is not reaching anywhere, we have calls being made from different parts of Nigeria. I mean, you know, sit wherever it is that you're representing people from. I mean, you are making calls to them in their localities, and, you know, I don't know, maybe there are some things I'm not seeing that the legislators are seeing. Just maybe that there are some information that I'm not aware of. But you make calls to Maiduguri, you make calls to Sambisa Forest, you make calls to everywhere, and we're saying that we cannot. I mean, look at that mail last week. JAMB results, electronic voting, ICANN exams, electronic voting, MBA, this one, at least like about 8 or 10, and then INEC election results on foot. Come on.
You know, above all else, you just wonder, for those who have been funding INEC all these years, when you put your money in certain things, you want to see results, no matter what kind of progression, geometric, incremental, or otherwise. You want to see progress. Now, how would they feel if at the end of the day, after all these years of funding, and then you still say that we can't do this? Funders will feel, so why am I putting my money here? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, the commission. I don't think they heard from the commission in the National Assembly on that particular day.
On the day
on the floor of the Senate.
The NCC came.
The day of the Senate.
Yeah.
The day of the hearing.
I think the speaker said we would have NCC and INEC.
So it was INEC?
But on the day when the decision was taken, NCC was there. We didn't see INEC.
So exact same thing. So INEC wasn't there. Senate, INEC wasn't also there. So was it deliberate? Anyway, INEC voices, they want to get their voices heard. And here is one of such.
Our position has been clear, our position has been consistent, and that is that this particular commission is irrevocably committed to deepening the use of technology in the electoral process, and that we want broad powers to enable us deploy relevant technology in the electoral process. As you are aware, this particular commission has been test running different technological solutions in the electoral process for quite some time. And if you also look at some of the elections we have organized since 2020, you can see that we have uploaded the results of 22 elections, including state assembly elections, House of Representatives elections, senatorial elections, and governorship elections into our central portal, where the public had an opportunity of viewing them. Now, these elections that we have uploaded course across all the 6 geopolitical zones. So we have uploaded results from very remote areas, even from areas where you have to use human carriers to access. We have uploaded results from those areas. So we have made our own position very, very clear that we have the capacity and we have the will to deepen the use of technology in the electoral process. But as I say, our powers are given by the Constitution and the law, and will continue to remain within the ambit and confines of the powers granted to the Commission by the Constitution and by the law.
All right, welcome back. Let's take you through some of the dailies this Monday morning. So, mini, mo. Well, that's not how we choose it, actually. Let's start with Vanguard newspaper today. Results transmission were not against INEC. Reps. Did you say really? Well, as a lead headline here, say capacity issue is between NCC, INEC. So,
what about the service providers here? Because I recall reading something from one of the service providers saying we've covered almost 90%, 3G almost 80%.
What's interesting in that interview with Mr. Okoye, is that they said that they have consulted with all the telcos, confirming what you've just said now, that they have conversations with all the telcos, one after the other and together, and they have told them that, okay, when you do not have coverage, I have coverage. Where you do not have coverage, I have coverage. That's part of the things that INEC said in that conversation.
So what did the Senate and reps then do? How did they So, look, all those questions are equally playing up in everybody's head. The second one here, PDP lawmakers ask Buhari to represent bill in September. Accuse reps leadership of inviting NCC director to lie to Nigerians. Call for his prosecution for committing perjury. NAS only moving to rig in 2023. Pandef. Ohanese, ADF tackle NAS over rejection of electronic transmission. Riggers protecting their interest. MBF. Why we voted for e-transmission of results with conditions. Lawan says some PDP senators also voted for it. So, there you go. So what, is sprinkling of PDP senators to give it that credibility or spread or acceptance? Who knows?
If I may ask, do you know how your representative voted? Let's know, really. I mean, let's be sure the Nigerians are really a part of this. Find out, how did my representative vote? Is that how I wanted my representative to vote, or at least a majority? Let's know. You can send us a mail, by the way.
Yeah, I'm assuming, for instance, if a region had 15 senators and only 3 were present to vote, how do you explain that? How? Just how in the world? And some of them come back and say they want to contest for governorship. And then the same people who they fail to represent, they now want to come and serve them? Oh, wow. Mr. and Mrs., yeah, it's right there today. Mr. Telling Mrs. The man said, may God wipe crime away from our society. Your amen was the loudest. Do you realize you're the wife of a lawyer?
I didn't see that.
Well, it depends on what kind of lawyer, really. I mean, not all lawyers have to deal with crime, right? There's entertainment lawyer.
But don't forget that there are crimes and there are crimes. Financial crime is a crime.
Passion crimes.
Okay,
wow. Well, don't forget to check out the back pages here. There are huge, several stories which will interest you. So just, make a pick and you'll be glad you did. That's Vanguard today.
Well, let's pick up the Nigerian Tribune with the lead story. CSO's lawyers, PDP vow to reject amended clause in e-transmission of election results. Canvass visa ban, recall of erring NAS members. Fear grips Southern NAS members. Nigerians should insist 2023 poll is internet compliant. Afenifere. We'll take a look at what telcos are saying. Electronic transfer of results possible. That's the Nigerian Tribune quoting telcos saying electronic transfer of results possible. APC PDP lawmakers voted against committee recommendation. Senate President, yes, he's been given some insight into what played out there at the Senate last week. But you see the picture on the front page.
Yeah, but even some senators and some members of reps whose constituencies have, if not 80, 89 or 90, 100% coverage, still voted against this. So you then wonder.
Is this still about coverage then?
So,
and then, don't also forget that conversation around voting along political interests, by party lines, as opposed to even regions. And that's very, very interesting, really.
The picture on the front page is really sad. and you know it hits home a lot. It's a scene of an accident involving an articulated vehicle, which container fell on a car. Yes, and one person died, another person critically injured. And you know that was the same route a lot of people took yesterday. People traveling out of Lagos, and you know I was actually on that road yesterday, and just right beside me was this truck with 2 containers. Of course, it was not latched anyway, and different thoughts were running through my mind, and this is what a lot of people have to go through. Sadly, someone passed on as a result of this, another person injured.
Isn't there, we talked about this, not latching of tankers to the vehicles. Isn't there anyone listening or watching or monitoring?
You know,
they've been doing something about it, but one wonders, how do they explain this if it's unlatched, in spite of all the measures that they've been taking previously? Maybe some people somewhere might have dropped the ball, and this is what you get when that happens sometimes.
Really sad. And right under that, you see bandits kill 13 policemen, 2 others in Zamfara. That's the front page of the Nigerian Tribune for you.
Daily Trust newspaper this morning is interested in the 3rd wave. Testing isolation centers shut in states despite imminent COVID-19 3rd wave. Well, of course, it's on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. You can just enjoy. You can just imagine it. 4 riders there. FG may apply segmented lockdown. That's according to PSC, President Steering Committee. FCT, 6 states on red alert. Why Nigeria is at risk, says NCDC. Suspend Durbar. Committee advises emirs. All of that you find.
Sound like Dubai.
Dubai trips, right?
Yeah, well, that's what you find on the front page right there. And 3 pictures you see there on the front page. Abandoned isolation center in Ilorin, isolation center in Damaturu on the locks, and deserted isolation center in Ibadan. All right there on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Of course, right under that one, you also see that story, 15 policemen, 10 bandits killed in Zamfara, Niger attacks. And right under the nameplate, bullets alone can't stop banditry, other crimes, says former President Jonathan. That's the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Morning, Makwe.
Morning, gentlemen. Good morning, Nigerians. Let's take a look at what the Abuja Inquirer is saying to you this morning, or has on your front pages for you. As we speak right now, the FCT seems to be emptying out. You know, the way out of the FCT is very busy. The way into the city looks quite deserted. But look at what they have. COVID-19 Delta variant. FCTA rolls out new guideline. Abuja parks, recreational grounds stay closed. That's what they say. It's on page 3. It's so sad and so disheartening. I know that, that's COVID-19 is around and we have to take these new measures. But when you think of the fact that there's a public holiday tomorrow, next tomorrow, at least, I don't know if it's been announced yet, but at least that's what Nigerians are working with, that there will be public holidays declared for tomorrow and next. And you also think of the fact that children are now on holidays. You have to ask, what is there for them to do? Well, the story is right on the front page. Online voter registration, 32,015 FCT residents register in 2 weeks. So there are people who are keeping tabs. There's a page 3 read for you. And just on top of the nameplate, World Congress's APC delegates to pay 1,000 naira. Peg's youth leader at 35. Interesting. The question is, how are you going to be ensuring that people are not declaring what they call football ages? That's going to be an interesting one. Page 3, I will give you details. And on a very disturbing side of things, cholera death toll now 54. FCTA steps up sensitization. And you see there's 2 security agents nabbed over involvement in exam malpractice. It's a page 9 read. Demolition, varsity community worst hit with 610 structures down. Some exercise has been going on here in the FCT. People building where they're not supposed to build have been, facing the hammer in recent times. Looks like a university has also faced its own fair share of it. So big questions to be asked as to where they get the approval to do things that they ought not to have done in the first instance. Page 5 might give you insight. Let's leave it there for the Abuja Inquirer.
Or take a look at The Guardian next. High prices deprive faithful of Salah celebration amid declining inflation. They put declining there in parentheses. And look at the riders. Review import tariff on inputs to check inflation, says Yusuf. Currency depreciation is disastrous for import-dependent economy. How to reduce inflationary pressure, says Owo. So you got all of that packed in that lead story here today. And then beneath that, Nigeria's 2022 digital switchover target uncertain as FG slows on timeline. Digital transition is on course, says NBC. Lagosians unaware of free TV as designated sales centers yet to begin. So then it's just get some updates on that one. And in case you might have lost track of this, remember that case involving the CCT chair, the harassment and appearing before the Senate? Okay, well this story might as well underscore it. CCT chair sues Lawan Malami others over his probe for alleged assault. You just may wonder, whoa, how? Just read the story and you get that context. That's Guardian's Day.
Well, for the Nigerian News Direct, the big one is banks' credits to government hits 60-year high. Analysts blame hike in borrowing on revenue shortfall. Government borrowing from bank is less productive, former President CIBN. So it's a page 4 read. Might interest you. And also this one, why NAFDAC is yet to approve any herbal medicine for treatment of COVID-19. Low-hanging fruits are here. Well, it's not low just yet, or at least the fruits are not approved to be consumed just yet.
Oh, you mean it's not ripe enough?
Maybe it's not. Oh, I think that's a very good one. It's on page 3. And
how long is it going to take? For
some fruits take different, periods to, get ready.
So this is just one of those.
Yeah. Since we're using that analogy, or that's, a couple of other stories, but let's leave it there for Nigerian News Direct.
Leadership newspaper this morning is still very much interested in e-transmission of election results. CSOs, lawyers chide National Assembly for neglecting will of Nigerians. That's the story on page 4. Engage in wide consultation on next line of action. It's a shame we're still debating electoral fraud in Nigeria. Ascribed to lawyers. Senate President defends lawyers' action. That's what you have right there on the front page of the paper. Right under the nameplate, concerns over non-issuance for money agents amid insecurity. Find that on page 4. And a good number of other stories right there on the front page. Oh, by the way, this one. Presidency criticizes Kuka for reporting Nigeria to U.S. Congress. Find that story on page 12.
The Telegraph has this one. Fear grips senators who voted against electronic transmission. Some issue statements saying they did nothing against it. Accuse opposition of trying to pit them against their constituents. You find details on page 2 of the paper. And you also see this autumn. Resurrected water resources bill is cattle colony Ruga in disguise. 6 federal government 100 billion naira approval to boost ranching in Benue. And you see the CCT chair drag Senate Lawan, AGF others to court. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph. And if we can quickly do this for you, Blueprint has this. COVID-19 third wave / Salah. Federal government places Kano, Lagos, Rivers, Kaduna, FCT, 2 others on red alert. Orders states to heighten protocols enforcement. Assures on border protection at Salah. FCT shut parks. Southwest senators urge tight security, warn on agitations. And you also see this one, a positive one. NIPRID develops 3 COVID-19 products, 10 others. Let's leave it there for Blueprint newspapers.
Well done, I prayed. So let's see them roll in and let people begin to access them. So that's at least on a good note. So there you go. That is it with a look at Somebody Daily is here today. We will be back in a moment. We've got a lot on our plate, so don't go away. You can grab a cup of coffee anyway. Welcome back. Well, you get to see his real face, not that one actually. So, but the name is the name. Mustafa Isa is the president of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. He's right here. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. So there you go. Apologies for that mix-up.
Oh, it's okay.
Well, you know, there's been a lot making the rounds about that directive by the NBC to broadcast stations, both electronic and the print, electronic radio and TV. So you've seen that, lots of reactions coming through, and who knows for how long it will be. So what were your immediate thoughts reading that, as a matter of fact?
My first thought is, I wasn't surprised really, because in the last 3 months, the GID has cause to issue 3 statements against the actions of the NBC. Even when they imposed $5 million fine on channels and Inspiration FM, we did that. But it's just that this is the first love letter in code from the new DG of NBC. Say that, number one, we shouldn't, as way they put it, kind of glamorize bandits, kidnappers, and insurgents. And my worry about that letter is that it is not really, it is vague. When you say that, don't give details of security incidents, how details are the details? Is the NBC say that, for instance, if there's a kidnap in a school, we should report the numbers of students kidnapped, the name of the school, and the action of security or try to, rescue them? So a lot of things are in that letter that I really don't really understand. Then number 3, say that your guest or analyst, you should caution them against making statements that will divide the country and all that. I think it's vague. Because to you, what is divisive may not be divisive to me. But I think the media is a platform where people come and express their ideas. And it's a marketplace of ideas, you know. Some could speak for and against anything. So you cannot say, don't say this and you say this. You know, but one thing is very clear, that the media would never promote violence. It's clear. We would never do that. Then number 2, the issue of security details, reported details of security agency. For instance, I don't think the media will ever report that there's a planned operation by the security agencies. The media will never report that, because when you do that, you are giving information to the enemy. I don't think the media will ever say public details of an ongoing security operation, for instance, or pictures of dead soldiers and wooden soldiers. That would be counterproductive. I don't think we ever do that. So I think we need more clarity for the NBC or what he actually meant by that letter.
I guess that leads to that question I was going to ask you anyway. Do you see any value in that? Any validity in the content of that communication from the NBC? Do you see any justification for any concern, any reason for concern in that from what that letter says?
My immediate conclusion should be that it's a letter that has gone out as we are expecting something different, something new, because he said it's a caution, you know, we should be cautious of what we do, and we went ahead to list what should be done. And from my own interpretation, it's difficult for us to really understand the motive behind it, because if they give us license to operate, it will tell us enough to ensure that we do what we have to do. You know, this idea that when you are in power, you feel that we are the only patriot, why others are not patriotic, I don't think we should go that line, really. The media, if you take a look at our history, we've always been patriotic. During the colonial days, the media fought for independence. Even when the military struck and struggled our democracy, we had vanguard in fighting for democracy restoration in this country. Even though we are enjoying today, we fought for it. Some of our colleagues even lost their lives in the process. And media had to be closed. We always fought for what is right. You know, that is our history. And to think that we glamorize, for instance, they say, don't glamorize insurgency. To glamorize means to make something seem acceptable, kind of. Why should that? Why did the media do that? The media have been victims of evil insurgency in this country. Some of our colleagues have been killed. You lost a reporter to Boko Haram in Kano. This office in Abuja was bombed. Media houses in Kaduna were attacked. So why should we glamorize insurgency, for instance? Why should we glamorize kidnapping, where some of our colleagues have been kidnapped and even killed? As we speak, I was supposed to travel to my village today to our chief for Salah. I couldn't go. You know why? I heard reports that the Bini Auchi Road have been experiencing kidnapping cases for the past 1 week. So I couldn't take that risk. We are all victims of this. So we would have loved it to even end today, if possible. We would love it to end. So this idea that we should do glamorize, I don't know, that we should report details of security, attacks or whatever. I don't know what they mean by that. You know, we are in the business of reporting events. The media doesn't create events. The media reports events. If attacks don't happen, we will not report. But if they happen, we will report them. That is our job.
You know, I mean, it's interesting you give that background of Nigerian media being patriotic, and you've referenced some of these incidents over time, and even till this moment, that Nigerian media continues to do to keep Nigeria together. And you also mentioned earlier that this caution, or this particular statement, was not as specific as you would have loved it to be. What kind of details would you have loved to see, at least such that we know this is regarding security, but the particular incidents, perhaps, you expect more to have been said? So what are those specifics?
Number one, MBD should give insights of glamorization of insurgency, banditry, and kidnapping. There was such example that the media had done. Then number two, when you say don't give details of attacks, what details should we leave out from any such attacks or kidnapping, for instance? Is it that you should report the number of students kidnapped if the school is attacked? Or if an emir is kidnapped, we shouldn't mention is the name of the emir? Or that insurgents have attacked a community and we keep 20 people, we should report the number? I don't just get it. You know, that's why it should be better for MB to have given us instances of where the media, for instance, had glamorized insurgency or have over-reported attacks by bandits and insurgents.
You know, that particular statement started by saying that the NBC recognizes that bringing information on security to the doorsteps of Nigerians is a necessity, essentially saying that, I mean, this is part of the job that the media is meant to do. And, you know, the NCC said that, you know, too much details, like you said, may have adverse implications on efforts of security. Well, that's that letter which you see on your screen there. Topics with ethnological quoting pitches one section of the country against the other. And, you know, it goes on and on to speak on some other issues. But I'd like to ask you, do you think that maybe the NBC might be referring to maybe some media organizations that are outside its purview? Because so far, at least the ones they regulate seem to have done a good job.
You know, you're right, because I'm also from the broadcast sector. I think, you know, there is this fear about the government, about the broadcast industry. That was why until 1992, when the dictatorship was promulgated by the IBB regime to deregulate the broadcast sector, it never allowed private people to participate. Even after the deregulation, we are highly regulated. You know, so it's clear that happens. You know, but the broadcast sector is still better in a way that we hardly report such things. Hardly. Some things you can read in the papers, you can never find them in broadcast stations. Never. Okay. Maybe because, you know, they feel that we regulate the broadcast sector, but in our press review every morning, we bring in the unregulated, in quote, newspaper and air them on TV. You know, that is why my fear is that I hope they will not, in the end, stop us from press review. We review newspapers every morning.
Let's even read that whole letter from start to finish, because I mean, some lawyers will take it clause by clause, you know, so that they can explain what transpired. So there you go. Newspaper review and current affairs programs, a need for caution. Yeah. It goes on to read, the National Broadcasting Commission wishes to draw attention to critical issues arising from review of newspapers by broadcast stations daily. Headlines of most newspapers on daily basis are replete with security topics. While bringing information on security to the doorsteps of Nigerians is a necessity, there is need for caution, as too much detail may have adverse implications on the efforts of our security officials who are duty-bound to deal with the insurgency. Some of the topics also have ethnological coating, thereby pitching one section of the country against the other and leaving Nigerians in daily hysteria. The Commission therefore enjoins broadcasters to collaborate with government in dealing with the security challenges by not glamorizing the nefarious activities of insurgents, terrorists, kidnappers, bandits, etc., advising guests and or analysts on programs not to polarize the citizenry with divisive rhetoric in driving home their point, not giving details of either the security issues or victims of these security challenges so as not to jeopardize the efforts of the Nigerian soldiers and other security agents. The Commission reminds you to be guided by the provisions of Section 541F and 543 of the NBC Code that states, quote, the broadcaster shall not transmit divisive materials that may threaten or compromise the indivisibility and indissolubility of Nigeria as a sovereign state, and in reporting conflict situations, the broadcaster shall perform the role of a peace agent by adhering to the principle of responsibility, accuracy, and neutrality, end of quote. Warm regards, Francesca Ayeto, Mrs. Director, Broadcasting Monitoring for Director General. Well, now we did reach out to the NBC to at least avail us that opportunity and privilege to explain to a lot of people who may not understand certain things here and leave it to their own interpretation. But I think they said that perhaps in the days ahead, we just might have that because they will not and are not able to make it on the program today. So that is that letter. But we have other panelists. Don't worry, Mrs. A, you still have a lot of opportunities to make a lot more points. But let's get to Mark, when I think she may have a question or two for you, as well as our guest there.
Indeed. Let me quickly put the question I have to our guest in the studio in Lagos before I introduce my guest here in Abuja, or the guests we have here in Abuja. I'm just wondering, you know that indeed broadcast is highly regulated and there's a lot of work going on in that particular sector. It's the reason why we've seen this letter in the first instance, directing broadcast stations to be mindful, be cautious, so to speak. And some people will say that perhaps if we had a way of checking what was going on generally within the media space, perhaps there would have been no need for this. Don't forget that early this year, a colleague of ours had cause to write about her concerns in the media sector. I don't know if you saw that letter. It was written by Kadri Ahmed, you know, drawing the attention of fellow journalists to how things were being reported in the media space. She feared that the way things were going, let's not forget that at some point at the beginning of this year, there were heightened fears that things could degenerate. We saw what was happening in Ibadan. We saw some parts of the East, and we also saw reactions from the northern part of the country. In your own reading of things, do you think that we have played a role that moderates, or do you think that we have also, you know, added in the manner in which we report certain stories, that we've added to how things, according to this letter, the hysteria that Nigerians feel about the security situation in the country?
First and foremost, if attacks don't happen, the media will not report them because they're happening and there is fear in the land. You expect the media serves the public. You know, if bandits don't attack a school or kidnap 2 other students, the media wouldn't even report it. But there's certain thing that actually have my concern really, but not necessarily from the broadcast. For the print, for instance, you know, first and foremost, there are some papers are set up for different purposes, so serve different interests. For instance, personally, I'm against the fact that we stigmatize some criminals or attach the ethnic origin of a criminal in our reports. I am plenty against that. So I've seen that in some of the newspapers, and I'm against it. You know, but what I also notice is that regional papers tend to kind of play up regional interest. I think today in modern media, I think that is allowed. Even in the US today, you could see Fox News, CNN, and other people. They even go ahead and endorse candidates during the elections. You know, they move to that level right now. You know, if you don't allow this happening, you can go and counter it. But I do know that, for instance, in channels, if somebody says, for instance, let's form our own country based on our own ethnic origin, some may say, we don't like it. You know, but you can put 2 of them on your program, you express your idea, another will come and counter it. Let the viewer decide who is right or wrong.
Sorry, but let me just jump in and spin off of that question. Could it be that the media, have we been able to draw the line so that we don't necessarily give them oxygen, the insurgents or terrorists now, because, you know, a lot of them might like propaganda. So is the media feeding into that? Have they been able to draw the line? Could that be the concern that the Commission has?
You know, definitely, you know, for terrorists feed on propaganda. They feed on publicity. I think we should deny them that, really. For instance, if you see a cover of a governor passing, they can just fire a gun. Even they know that you can't get the governor, but just to have big headlines the next day. Governor's convoy attacked, you know. They feed on publicity. We can deny them that. You know, we are not, the media in Nigeria, we are not really, for instance, the issue of security, for instance, we always support the security agencies. You know, we will not, I will be here to say that there is a plan by security to carry an operation and you expect the media to report it. We'll be giving information to the terrorists. Before they get it, they will put our media, our soldiers in harm's way. We will not ever do that. But clearly, even when there are excesses on the part of the media, there should be ways to deal with it. There are ways to deal with it. We are in broadcaster, for instance. The embassy is there. That's why I said in the letter, they should have told us exactly instances where we will have glamorized attacks, or we will give you 2 more details of attacks. But they did say that. Or maybe they convey a meeting of broadcasters and tell us exactly what they mean.
I'll go right ahead now and introduce the guests we have here in our Abuja studios. We have Mr. Mike Ejiofor, who's a former director at the DSS, and also he's, I was going to say, I was a little confused as to DSS or SSS. It says SSS here, but hey, you know what I mean. DSS, SSS, they're one and the same thing. And then we'll also be talking about the legality of the directive. We have with us Mr. Ofion, who's a senior advocate of Nigeria. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily, gentlemen.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start with you, Mr. Ejiofor. You have seen this directive by the MBC. I nearly said DSS. But one of the things that they're concerned about is demoralizing the security agents who have to, you know, attend to the issues around security. Do you think that the manner in which broadcast houses, and this is very important because what the papers do is one thing. How the broadcast houses now in turn relay this is another kettle of fish. Do you think that the security agents have anything to fear with the manner in which broadcast houses have relayed what is on the front pages?
Oh, I don't see anything wrong with what the broadcasters are doing in terms of review of papers. And I still can't understand the details of the directive from the NBC. If this directive had been coming from maybe security agencies, one will understand it. Because this is a regulatory body. And there are defined offenses. If such offenses are committed, I have seen situations in the country here when NBC came out and sanctioned some broadcast houses. So for a general statement that people should be cautious, broadcasters should be, I'm at a loss. I don't fully understand it. Because my point is that the Nigerian media has been very responsible since the inception of this thing. I had, in terms of reportage, there was a day some occasions also I appeared on television questioning when the military claims that 1,000 insurgents have been killed. We don't see the pictures, we don't see, but you see, for the social media, I'm talking of conventional media now, for the social media who carry fake news, well, I think NBC should go after those people. Well, for
NBC said that's not their space. They don't regulate social media.
They don't regulate. So if they don't have any, or if they have any specific offense committed by any of the conventional media, they should take action. I recall too that there have been quarterly meetings. I can't remember. I think 2018 or 2019, when the State Security Service engaged the media executives to educate them on the line, because the line is thin between security, national interest, and sensationalism among the media houses. Yes, we admit there are occasions we have sensationalism, but I can tell you that they've been responsible in reportage in terms of what they have been putting out to the public. And if you're talking of paper reviews, these are issues reported. And you say the media houses should not report what was reported. So I don't get.
No, we should be careful. I mean, they say we shouldn't glamorize. There were specific instructions, even though some people are still saying we need a little more clarity on that. Don't glamorize this. Don't, let me see if I can get details now. Chamberlain read it out earlier. Not glamorizing the nefarious activities of insurgents and terrorists. We should advise guests and analysts on programs not to polarize the citizenry with divisive rhetoric in driving home their point, and not giving details of either the security issues or victims of these security challenges, so as not to jeopardize the efforts of the Nigerian soldiers and other security agents. So those are the three key issues for them.
Did they liaise with the security agencies before coming out with this directive?
Do you think that that would be the question I was going to ask you next? Do you think that could have happened behind the scenes? Maybe the security agents agencies decided to complain to the NBC.
I don't think so. If it were to be the case, I think they should speak for themselves, not the NBC speaking on security, leaving its own statutory functions of regulation.
Let me come to you, Mr. Ofion, because I mean they have done raised this issue with a particular section of the code of the guide's broadcast. They say the Commission reminds you to be guided by the provisions of Section 5.41F and 5.4.3F of the NBC Code that states that the broadcaster shall not transmit divisive materials that may threaten or compromise the indivisibility and indissolubility of Nigeria as a sovereign state, And in reporting conflict situations, the broadcaster shall perform the role of a peace agent by adhering to the principle of responsibility, accuracy, and neutrality. That's what they cite here. And they believe that this should come to play in reporting what is on the front pages of the papers.
Okay. Let me take maybe a step back and say that there are a number of legal and constitutional instruments implicated in what is going on here. The first is to say that the NBC, under the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission Act, is entitled to bring out a code, a national broadcasting code. So if they have brought out a national broadcasting code, as they have stated, they are within the statutory right to do so. However, in this country, we operate a constitution which declares itself to be supreme. So it is not sufficient that the NBC relies upon the NBC Act to promulgate a national code. They must as well look over their shoulders to ensure that what they promulgate as the NBC code. See, principally, the regulation on expression, freedom of expression, stem from a historical background where government sought to control thought. Government sought to control what expressions are made and so on. So, coming from that background, I'm suspicious whenever government is out there trying to control thought by way of content and so on. I think, speaking for myself, that what you need, you can't, if that is the truth, let me be very clear about this. If a man had been attacked by a herdsman, and that's what he saw, and that's what he experienced, to ask him to deny that, it's like asking him to deny the truth which he knows. And if the editors of whatever program get hold of that information, and they may be sensitive to it if there is a violent, an expectation that violence may erupt. That's right. But it cannot be on a regular basis that you ask people to suppress what the truth is. And let me also say this. You see, I'm not an advisor to the government. And I worry about sometimes the kind of actions they take, because the actions they take may also reflect bad on them. Is the government aware that part of what is fueling this problem, this ethnic profiling, is the conception, or is the thinking that government is actually protecting certain ethnic groups? I do not know what the truth lies in that. But if government persists in saying, don't profile these people, they are going to emphasize that narrative. The narrative that, oh, they're out again with government authority, with government power to protect a certain group of people. So they should think about that. If you ask me, the real challenge of government is this, that the effectiveness of law enforcement. Look, if people have attacked a community and they are apprehended, effort is exerted and they are apprehended, and you know who they are, and they are brought to trial. You understand? It wouldn't matter where they came from. People would think justice has been served. The problem you have, the problem we have in this country is this, that these attackers continue to remain faceless. And then you have a situation in which you're trying to suppress those who think that truth is that these attackers are from a particular part of the country or a particular ethnic group from saying so. That's going to be counterproductive on the government. That's going to be counterproductive on support for the government. So the government should rather devote its energy towards discovering who these people are. And can I say something
else, finally, on this point. You know, I'm generally very suspicious of this narrative about unknown gunmen. I'm old enough in this country, lived long enough in this country. During the Abacha regime, what you found is that there were a lot of attacks and killings, shootings here and there. And it was all attributed to unknown gunmen. Then a government came, which was opposed to the Abacha government. And suddenly, we now found that unknown gunmen were only unknown to us. They were known to government. It was actually government agents. I do not want to live and believe that our police force, our law enforcement agencies. Look, we have like 17 law enforcement agencies, and we cannot be effective enough to apprehend people who attack community, who attack farmlands, who attack even the rustlers, even the owners of cattle themselves, who get attacked. And that we cannot find that out. No, it smells too much like there's a cover up here. So NBC should be wary of being used to perpetrate a narrative which will end up being counterproductive to the interests of the government. That's what I would say.
Well, let me quickly ask Mr. Ejiofor, are there details that you have seen on the front pages of dailies before now that you think, I mean, as a security expert and one who's worked with an intelligence agency, that has given you cause for concern that this should never have made the front pages in the first instance?
For the recent time, I'm not aware of anyone that has given that kind of sensation or coloration of ethnic grouping and that. But like I said before, that the Nigerian media has been very responsive and responsible, and that's as a result of engagement between the security agencies and the media. I'm aware of several meetings between the State Security Service, for instance, and some media executives. I can remember there was a time they were even quartered for maybe 3 days, the media executives in the Institute for Security Studies, National Institute for Security Studies, where they were taught, in addition to their own profession, the distinction between making news and national interest. We cannot compromise our national interest on platter of selling newspapers, and I think since the engagement continued, we've had positive results. I'll give you an example. While I was in the service, I had the luck of having headed more than 7 states. And the first thing I do when I get to any state is to look for the NEJ chairman, to engage him and talk with the media on the need. Because the difference is that the media reports for the public. The intelligence agency, for instance, reports for government to take action and formulation of policies. So I tell you,
in the reporting business.
Oh yes, we're in the reporting business, and I tell them, honestly, I make bold to say that sometimes I give them exclusives, front page news, because it's of no value to me. And there are some too they have, and I say, look, this is not of interest to you, so give me. We'll have exchange of information, and that's the way it should be. I believe in proper engagement instead of this issue of NBC coming. I smell a rat.
What's the rat you smell?
Perhaps there's a particular organization or some organization that are being targeted. This is just a smooth screen to give a warning. Yes, we did say that people have been reporting, because if paper reviews, you give details of what is happening in the newspaper. Some people want to use that opportunity to go and buy newspapers of interest. So I don't see anything wrong with that. And honestly speaking, NBC should be very, very cautious instead of cautioning the media.
Let me flip this now to Lagos. I know my colleagues have questions for you, gentlemen.
Yeah, let me ask Mr. Ofiong, in consideration of that, the letter by the NBC, because, I mean, the general rule for editors to reporters is that the first paragraph must at least answer the questions of the principle of who said what, when, where, why, and how. And by so doing, they'll have all the ingredients to write their stories. Now, those are details. So now this letter says they should not discuss or divulge details. And then it quotes the NBC code where it says the broadcaster shall not report or broadcast divisive materials. So one wonders, how do we even define those divisive materials? Because we had several social scientists, researchers who have said, the authors who have said, look, meanings are not necessarily in words, but they are in people. So in what circumstances, looking at this letter, will the broadcaster have been adjudged to have broken the law with their reportage moving forward?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Ofion, for you.
I'm going to disappoint you, Chamberlain, because the way the law operates in this country, you wouldn't have the content, in terms of the conduct, the specific conduct can only be stated in general terms. You asked about what would be divisive here. Well, the unfortunate thing is you have to get to the courts when the prosecuting agencies complain that what you have done is divisive, to find out whether or not it meets the divisive criteria. I'll give you my thought on this. See, recently, a gentleman in Lagos, a lawyer, I think Solomon Okadere, went to the Federal High Court and sought to challenge the Cyber Crimes Act on the basis that it was unconstitutional. And the basic question which he posed to the court was that words such as annoyance, scandal, and so on were vague and incapable of precise meaning. So how does a citizen know that this particular conduct falls within the pale of the word annoyance? And the court simply threw out his case and said to him that, well, that is clear enough. When the matter gets back to us on the specific, we don't deal with academic questions, we deal with specific actions. When the case comes back to the court dealing with the specific conduct, that's when you get to know if that conduct is annoyance or whatever. So the parallel in what I'm saying is that the same thing would go for the word divisive. It is only when a particular conduct is an issue that you'll be able to say that this is divisive or it is not divisive. I don't think you have any other way of knowing ahead of a particular conduct being called into question.
Well, Mr. Issa, clearly there's a lot of work for the broadcaster, beg your pardon, the editor in particular. Let's come back to Lagos now. There's a lot of work on the hands of the editor right now. I mean, the question that Chamberlain asked should actually be for you, or rather should also be for you. The 5 W's and the H. Yeah. How do you not give details when you cast, especially in broadcasting, your first 3 paragraphs?
Maybe judging from the letter from the NBC, we should cut you from 5W and the H to maybe 2 W's. Now not to give 2 more details according to that letter. We have to give details. Our viewers, our listeners, and our readers, they want to get the details from us. And that is how we are in the business of reporting you. So for you to say that we should give 2 more details. And now you see the word divisive rhetorics. Now, who defines that? Same thing, the issue of national interest. It's just vague. Who defines that? Because I do know that most of the time, what government sees as national interest may actually be for government interest. They are different. But most times they use that to gag the media. Okay, this is the national interest. Whereas actually is actually for the interest of the government in power. They are different. Government comes, government goes, but Nigeria as a country remains.
Let me ask you, so my apologies, yeah. let me quickly punctuate you and ask you this one. On the one hand, the Constitution says the press has the responsibility of holding government to account. On the other hand, the editor has the tough assignment of putting out news, but not putting out news that could aggravate. What are some of the considerations that you already make, that media already makes in the newsroom that people may not be aware of?
You know, thank you for that question. Most times, we don't even report everything that we see. We don't. We'll leave out certain things. For instance, if there's a clash between two ethnic groups, even when we know their names, we'll just say a clash between two ethnic, we'll not mention two ethnic groups because if that happens and there are casualties, they could be supposed to attack elsewhere. So we'll leave out the names of the ethnic groups involved, just to ensure that there will be counter attacks elsewhere. So we all do that. That is why even security agencies sometimes they invite the editors for what they call confidential briefing. They tell a lot of details of what is happening. You get the point, because they have confidence in us. And you will never find such information in newspapers or on TV and radio. Because you have this mutual understanding that you are working in national interest. That is why they have the confidence to call us for such confidential briefing, where they give us confidential information that we will never divulge. You get the point? Because we have that confidence. Well, as one of the guests in Abuja rightly said, I think this should have come from the security agencies to tell us where we have erred or whatever. But to me, the NBC could have just invited the broadcasters to probably discuss to them the issue. Okay, for instance, what is divisive? It should give us instances of divisiveness. Then number two, when you say don't give too much details, NBC should also tell us what it means by too much details. Now we are left just there in the air. We don't know exactly what they mean.
The NBC actually invited some broadcasters, and pointed out some of those issues. Part of what, even though many sought more clarification, but I think part of what concerns may have been to be highlighted was that anchors of programs need to know the laws. They need to understand that, we all know that you hold the airways in public trust for the people. There's what we call NTBB.
Not to be broadcast.
Universal rule. Mm-hmm. Those are common laws that you don't violate. So basic things about ensuring that, broadcast houses and anchors do their housekeeping, understand their facts, and not just allow people to spew falsehood on the air. So those are pretty basic things. So if they comply with a lot of those, who knows? Would they have made any huge impact?
As broadcasters, when you have a live program, for instance, and your guest just says something that you feel clearly against the rules, you could quickly counter him to say, okay, please don't say that. You can even sometimes force him to take back his word or apologize. When you leave him to just say whatever he likes, then that will be an issue. Or probably even before the program, you have some discussions. But sometimes, even somebody agrees to you off air, he may say something else while on air. So these are clear. But don't forget that the media ought to be free. If you take away that freedom from the media, what we have is just public relations.
So could it be that the message that the Commission tries to pass across may have been muddled up with some of these? Because if you listen to, I think in Abuja too, they mentioned when police, security agencies parade certain people who, according to laws here, are innocent until proven guilty by the court of law, they show their faces and some of those things. So isn't that where the media needs to have a lot more caution? Because at the end of the day, there are cases where they get to courts and they're eventually set free. So having already paraded them and shown their faces, there's no way they go back, because in the minds of the people, they would have been adjudged guilty as paraded.
I expect every editor to cover that with the laws of libel and defamation. So if you parade the suspect, you show his picture, and in the end, the matter goes to court and he wins the case. In the mind of the public, he's already guilty. So he must sue you for libel or kind of. So that is why today, so many have their own house style. They blur the picture of such suspects. While some take the picture from their back to ensure they don't possibly show their real pictures. Because they know that if that guy turns out to be innocent, in the end, they must sue them for libel. So it's a house style, really. And if a media house have been taken to court based on that, the police will not come and defend them. Defend it to say, okay, they were paraded by the police. Of course, they have done that. But what about you, the media house? If somebody sends me a press statement that's libelous, I'm not obliged to use it. If I take a look at it and discover that he has some libelous issues in there, I may just not use it. If I go ahead to use it and the victim, so to say, goes to court, my defense will not be that I got it from a particular political party. They might even sue the media house, even now the person who sent the press statement. That's why, as editors, we have to be very covered with the laws. Law of libel, defamation, and all that, to ensure that we are not victims. So that is why if police parade suspects and you want to use their picture, be ready for any court case. That is why to these media houses, we do not use those pictures, or we blur the pictures or cover their faces so that the public wouldn't see their faces, really, to avoid the litigation.
Nana Mustafa is our president, Nigerian Guild of Editors. Well, we'll be back in a moment. We'll still have some grounds to cover from Abuja as well, so don't go away.
Well, I thought we were going on break, but let's quickly wrap up with our guest here. I just want to quickly ask you, Mr. Ofyong, do you think, what do you think the media should be doing now in the face of this directive while we await some clarity on the part of the MBC? But from what you see now, what would you be advising media houses to do, especially broadcast houses?
Well, when you ask a lawyer that question, the immediate answer is take our proceedings against the NBA, also the NBC, to have clarity over that issue, because whatever agreement you have with the NBC today...
Why not a parley? Why would it have to be... why would they have to be going to court, especially when you know just how lengthy the process could get?
Well, I told you that if you're asking a lawyer that question, the reaction of the lawyer is go to court, because ultimately that's going to be the arbiter. Just chipping in on something which has been said here. Look, sometimes I'm not an editor, so I don't know what editors have to deal with. But when I hear a statement like, and I'm dealing here strictly as a lawyer, the parameter I'm looking at here is this law reasonable in a democratic society, having regards to national security, having regards to defense, having regard to public order, and so on and so forth. Because that is a limitation which is placed on the powers of the NBC. Now, taking a typical example, don't mention the victim of a crime in the setting. And I'm asking myself, how is that necessary in the democratic society? If you had a relation who traveled and you heard that something has happened in the area where that relation traveled to, you're actually anxious to know whether your relation is involved or not. You need information. And there are two things going on here. You see, when the media fails to put out the correct information out there, you actually leave the rumor mill to boil. So people invariably get through rumors, what the media is not putting out there. And that is more dangerous because it is much more exaggerated. It is more capable of exploding a situation. But it is necessary in a democratic society that relations of those who have been victims of crime should know as quickly as possible whether their relations are affected and whether they should immediately bring succor and help to relations in such situations. And I think that if the NBC is saying, don't put that out, I do not see how that would stand up to scrutiny by a court of law.
Let me quickly ask you, Mr. Ejiofor, just as we wrap up now. We now have a disruptor, social media. Do you think that they're now putting pressure on both the information that, the DSS and the media used to, have an understanding on before now? I mean, how is that shaping what is now happening within that space?
Like I said, there have been cordial relations between the media and the security agencies, and I think it should be sustained. The NBC, on its own part, should be more engaging than giving out these directives that could not be interpreted, because people give a different interpretation. The lawyers will give different interpretation, like Leonard Stick said here. The editors will say we are being gagged. So there should be more engagement, to get the people working together, all in the common national interest.
Well, it's a fine place to leave it, gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. We've been speaking with Mr. Ofion, who's a senior advocate of Nigeria, and also Mr. Mike Ejiofor, who is a former director with the Department of State. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. We'll take a break now. We'll be back shortly to consider another matter. Please stay with us.
Okay, so we'll turn attention to COVID-related matter. We've got Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed, who is the head of technical secretariat and then is a member of the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19, joining us from our studios in Kano. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, we know the government...
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Kano happens to be one of the 6 states that they put on red alert, saying several things need to be done to ensure we don't find ourselves with situations that will be very difficult to handle. How is Kano handling that information in the first instance, and what are you doing to ensure that things don't get out of hand?
Yeah, thank you very much. As you will recall, during the beginning of this pandemic last year, Kano suffered one of the most fatalities related to COVID-19. The Kano state government has done a lot in terms of training personnel, in terms of setting up isolation facilities, in terms of setting up rapid response teams, and in terms of rolling out, mitigation and containment measures in the state. So a lot has been done. Kano has had the experience, and Kano has recorded a large number of cases, a large number of mortalities. Also Kano is really one of the states that we have now designated as one of the red alert states. The reason for doing this is because of the recent events that we are noting in the country. We've seen a rising number of cases. We see a rising number of hospital admissions. And we have had a conversation with the state governors and also with some selected states regarding the measures that need to be taken to curtail or to prevent this imminent looming third wave that is hovering all over Africa.
Just for the purpose of clarity, Mr. Mohammed, Dr. Mohammed, what does that red alert signify?
It signifies that these are the So it signifies that these are the flash points of the pandemic. If you look at the states, we're talking about Lagos. Lagos has recorded over 60%, of the cases in the country. And even with the third wave, we started to see it rising from Lagos. We're talking about Oyo State. We're talking about FCT. We're talking about Kaduna, Plateau, Rivers, and also Kano. Now, these states constitute more than 92 or 93% of all the cases that we have seen in the country. Mind you, most of these states also have international airports, so they are designated points of entry. You have international passengers or persons of interest that come into the country through these cities. And we know that the third wave is going to be driven, or is currently being driven, by passengers of interest, people who come into the country, probably introducing new strains of the virus into the country. As you are aware, we have recently isolated the Delta variant, and we are taking every step that we deem necessary to prevent the spread, because the Delta variant is it has a faster spread, it transmits more easily, it's more virulent, and it leads to more hospital admissions or hospitalization than the other variant. So that is why these cities are specifically picked up, because if we're able to contain the epidemic in these cities to a great extent, we'll be able to slow down the spread of the virus, or slow down or flatten the curve of the third wave in the country.
I'm wondering what that red alert implies for the people, for the citizens, especially the indigenous, the residents of those particular states, you know, that you have that have already been flagged. That's really what I would love to know.
So that really means a higher level of preparedness and alert on the part of the authorities, for them to be preemptive, to prepare against rapid propagation of the disease, to put on all the containment measures that are already stated in the guideline, to bring up some level of enforcement, and also for them to also sensitize the public, so that we reduce congregation, we comply with the non-pharmaceutical interventions that are in place, and we also generally ensure that they are ready to brace up, you know, for any eventuality that will occur. So this is what it means for both the authorities and also for the people in these states.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the Presidential Steering Committee would also have considered the challenge of that delicate balance of lives and livelihood. In what ways do you think this may have been considered, and the people themselves could take responsibility along that line?
So certainly, from the very beginning of the pandemic, we've been very conscious about limiting the livelihoods of people. We saw during the lockdown the impact that had, particularly on people who have to live daily, you know, to make their earnings. And whatever measures we are taking now is to ensure that we maintain this delicate balance between our public health interventions and also the negative socio-economic impact that this will result in. So in doing this, that is why we are narrowing down to selected geographic locations. Right now, what we're doing is to put these states on red alert, meaning that we are going to heighten surveillance activities, we are going to heighten the containment measures, and we are going to heighten our mitigation efforts in these states. But at the same time, all other states also, you know, should be ready and be prepared, and also take the necessary measures that are required to ensure that people remain safe. So in terms of the specific activities that we expect these states to carry on, will include reducing public congregation. Certainly based on the current guideline, there are certain public places that should not be opened at this time. We have also to ensure that people comply to these measures of non-pharmaceutical interventions. So we expect these states to ramp up these efforts to ensure that people wear their masks in public places, to ensure that there is a restriction of gathering, limiting to about 50 people per space, or 50% capacity in terms of religious gatherings. And now with this festivities that are coming up, also, to scale down on the amount of festivities that usually, are carried out.
For a lot of people, the festivities have begun already. I mean, you could judge by the population you see on the roads, in vehicles, and of course, in those places of gathering. To what extent really would enforcement go for this one? Because I mean, it's one thing to give these guidelines, place these states on red alert. I imagine that other states are on amber alert anyway. But it's another thing to ensure that those rules are enforced. And if there's anything we've learned from the enforcement of COVID-19 protocols, it's been quite tricky. Do you have any new ideas, any new plans to at least make this one stronger?
So, as you are aware, enforcement is the function of state governments. We are engaging with the state governors and also with the state authorities to make sure that we comply as much as possible to these guidelines. Just as the point you mentioned, it's not meant to be punitive. It is really meant to protect people more, but also allow people to earn their livelihood. So some of the things that we are going to see in recent times after our conversation with the state governments will include a phased implementation of restriction of movement if these numbers continue to soar. We have outlined the stages that we are going to follow. We will start, with entertainment industry. We'll follow through with public gatherings, such as political rallies, and then we'll come down to maybe more services. We have already identified essential services that as much as possible, this will not be affected by that. But again, each case will be treated as it arises. As I said, the discussion will be with the state authorities to be able to enforce this in a phased manner.
Does this also include targeted lockdowns? Because I saw that on one of the front pages of the dailies. If it does, what set of criteria will be used to enforce this targeted lockdown?
So the criteria will be based on, like I said, the number of cases that we see rising in each of these locations, the amount of non-compliance that is noted, and you remember that all the states already have their task teams, though some of them are not really very active. So it's one to rejuvenate and to reactivate these task forces, and also to bring out these notices to public places. For example, for the markets, they should enforce no face mask, no entry, for example. If it is getting overcrowded, there will be restriction of the number of people that get into these public places. There may be some amount of reduction in the amount of people that attend offices, just like we had at the federal level, where up till this moment, grade level 12 officers still do not report to offices. So these are the measures that we will discuss with the states, and we'll continue to encourage them to implement. And certainly, they will now be enforced by the state task team to ensure that people comply.
So there's the non-pharmaceutical measures, definitely, and there's a pharmaceutical measure, which is, I think the most prominent is vaccination. And just recently, NAFDAC announced the approval of 2 more vaccines, Moderna and Sputnik V. And, Sputnik V is Russian. And, there's still the process of WHO approving that particular one. We had a conversation last week that talked about, the PSC having, a vaccination pillar within it. So what's the thinking, especially regarding Sputnik V vaccine within the PSC? Because I understand, of course, the MPHCDA is represented there.
So certainly, there are discussions currently going on bilateral between the Federal Ministry of Health, NPHCDA and also the Russian government. The dossiers have been submitted to NAFDAC, and as you mentioned, it has recently approved the use of this vaccine. And now what is left is just to continue with the negotiation to be able to procure and get these vaccines as fast as possible into the countries. But it's not only Sputnik and Moderna. We also get in some large doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca. We have been told to expect some doses before the end of July. We're also expecting some doses of Johnson & Johnson, almost about 3.9 million before the end of September as well. But as you know, this vaccine politics and promises have lingered for a long time, and we all know it was because of the huge demand placed on the manufacturers, particularly by the rich and advanced countries, to acquire for their own citizens. We have also heightened our own effort and negotiations in that regard, and we hope that this will soon begin to yield fruit to be able to get these doses of the vaccines into the country.
Is there any research going on in the States about what's going on with COVID, how to develop our own measures of vaccine? Or is the state even collaborating with any research institutions or agency or anywhere in the country or beyond the country?
Our research institutions have been very active, but as you are aware, we have not reached really that advanced stage where we will say that we will start manufacturing our own vaccines. But certainly there are negotiations, there are collaborations going on. The Federal Ministry of Health has assigned some funds into that. We're also collaborating with the private sector. The Honorable Minister of Health has pushed that idea to be able to have this public-private partnership to commence exploring the production of vaccines in the country, not only specific to COVID-19, but all other vaccines, because as we see now, the future of public health really is in preventing this epidemic. So certainly there are a lot of discussions, negotiations, and efforts that are going on, and these are backed by resources from the federal government.
Some researchers, some in your field in medical practice, also wonder if there's been any kind of research or feedback from people about the efficacy of the vaccines so that we can know, measure impact, measure effectiveness, and then be able to fast track. Anything about that so far? Because there are concerns that the vaccines were created, because of the first strain of the virus COVID-19, but now that we have this Delta variant, which according to information that you have also given us, is like 100% more virulent than the original strain. So has there been any research conducted or any feedback on the efficacy of the vaccines on the people who have already taken it, and consequently effect on those who may be affected by this new variant?
So efficacy of vaccines is something that continues to be measured, not only in specific locations, but also globally. As more people take the vaccine, whatever type they take, certainly information is collected, and it will be analyzed to see what proportion of the people actually come down with the disease out of the people who have been vaccinated. And that is the information that is required to calculate efficacy. In Nigeria, yes, we have a study protocol that has been proposed and is in its final stage now. Data has already been collected on all people who have been vaccinated, and we'll follow them up to see how many of these people who have been fully vaccinated, who have received either one dose or even the 2 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca and the subsequent vaccines that will be administered, that will now come down clinically with signs and symptoms, of COVID-19 and who will eventually get into admission of COVID-19, because this is the information that when you collect a large quantity, you use it to define the efficacy of vaccines. So like I said, it's not something that is done just locally, but it's something that is done globally. But I'm glad to say that, yes, this study is currently in the pipeline, and the data is already being collected. And when we reach that sufficient quantity to analyze and come out with inference, certainly that will be made public, and it will further buttress the efficacy of the vaccines at the various stages. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed, Head of Technical Secretariat and member of the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
All right, and so let's see how much of your messages we can get, and well, yeah, a number of issues that have made the rounds today. So this first one is coming through from Ima Isong. Yeah, you are talking about the e-transmission of election results. I don't understand it when NCC says they can only guarantee 50% coverage when even kidnappers can make calls from isolated thick forests where they keep their victims. House of Reps are yet to explain why INEC was absent at the sitting. This is so sad.
Ikedi Chris, on this, the discussion about NBC letter saying another soft way of shutting down the media. How can you mandate the media to be unprofessional? This is the fourth estate of the realm, the watchdog of the society. The media bridges the gap between the society and government. If the media fails to detail the society on an issue, then what is it doing as a media? If you don't want the media to report an issue, then don't create issues. Stop insecurity, banditry, nepotism, looting of public funds and injustice. Then you will have starved the media of issues to report.
Mohammed Abdulaziz on the same issue. My perspective about this, I believe there are some news items that the media should be careful about, mostly ethnic and religious violence in some parts of our country, so that it will not lead to crisis in the country. Some of the banditry news can cause panic in the society, but people still, we need news to know what to do.
And Victor Owo, talking about the NBC memo, says, like in everything, there is a good and a bad side. Information is power. Misinformation is powerful too. Non-information is equally dangerous. There must be a balance. Is NBC making this move for balance or to subtly gag the free press? When the government uses ethnic profiling, who checks them? We remember a time when a fellow in government reported news of Nigerians caught with drugs in certain countries, and how they made sure that they put out the names of the suspects boldly and mentioned the tribe they belong to. The people have a right to a counter-narrative. Let them strike a proper balance and leave out politics in this. Security starts with Security starts with need to know, need to retain, and need to hold. The people need to know. The press has that right to let us know, but they too must strike a balance. And Yomi Aziz has this one. Nigerians, that's talking about the third wave of COVID-19. Now, Nigerians need to be very careful about this third wave, most especially in those 6 states. Because if you look at it now, you will know people are moving from one state to the other on a daily basis, mostly within the 6 states. And the question is, did we have the, do we have the capacity to withstand it? That's the question Yomi Aziz is asking. Well, thank you so much for your meals. We never take them for granted. Thank you for sending them in. And thank you for being a part of the conversation this morning. Yeah. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm Kaido Kikiolu.
Barka da Sallah. I'm Ayo Makinde.
I'm Chamberlain Oso. Goodbye.